need to turn to an actual lawyer to get actual legal answers, and for that, it's always great to bring in our guy, Dan Green from Newman and Lichtenstein, also a sports law professor at Cortland. Dan, thanks so much for hopping on today.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me back on to talk about the latest and greatest in the world that is NIL and college athletics.
My goodness, there is plenty of latest, that's for sure, Dan. So I'd say just off the top, from the House v. NCAA settlement, from everything that has happened here in the last 7 days, from a legal perspective, give us a thumbnail of the major points here from your perspective of what's gone down.
Sure. So the House settlement was approved by Judge Wilkin out in California, 9 p.m. Eastern on Friday. It was, put my 18-month-old to bed, lay on the couch, my phone starts buzzing, and I feel like the world's about to end, and it turns out just the college athletics world is about to be turned upside down. So what the House settlement essentially ushers in is the first time where schools are able to directly pay their athletes in the form of revenue sharing. That's the biggest thing. The settlement also brings on back damage payments to athletes that were unable to capitalize and earn money based on their name, image, and likeness, mainly athletes that participated in NCAA athletics from 2016 to 2024, so those that enrolled in 2021, the latest. And it also brings on this new enforcement entity, the College Sports Commission, that will be taking a deeper dive into all third-party NIL contracts, mainly looking at NIL collective contracts to determine that they are not pay for play and determining whether they are for fair market value, which is a very controversial part of the settlement. The settlement also addresses big issues related to roster spots and, scholarships and everything like that, but those are really the main takeaways there.
The fair market value part, Dan, is the one that really stands out, right? Because it's like the major part that you're thinking about, and we've been waiting on this for a year longer, is that, okay, the schools are going to be able to pay players directly now. But then they slap the fair market value part on the rest of the NIL, which has been running rampant now for years. In my mind, and tell me if I'm wrong here legally, Dan, like in most aspects of life, right? Fair market value is whatever anyone's willing to pay you. Why is that different here, and how many legal issues may this run into going forward?
Yeah, you're pretty spot on there, Brian. When this whole idea about having a third-party entity, this College Sports Commission, and reviewing these agreements through NIL Go platform that's been put together by Deloitte, that caught my attention right from the beginning because, to be completely honest, I am not a fan of it. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work. I think it's going to create a lot of issues because, as you said, fair market value is whatever somebody's going to be able to, if somebody wants to pay you, which can be based off of a number of different factors. The reason why this has been put in place is because the NCAA, even after all the settlements, still doesn't allow pay for play. And, there's been issues and people complaining about how pay for play is still happening through these NIL collective contracts and payments. And now there's going to be this enforcement entity that's outside of the NCAA to look at these things. And there's already been confusion about which contracts are going to be reviewed, when do the schools need to start submitting, are they going to start submitting, and if this is just going to put NIL payments and payments to athletes back underground. And I think it's going to be pretty ripe for future lawsuits.
What I said yesterday here is, at least in my mind, looking at this, all right, if this is the rule, right, all this is doing, it's giving an excuse to schools that want to save money, and it's letting the other schools know how to break the rules again. Like, it doesn't seem like it's actually really going to slow anything down as far as money getting to athletes, which is what they seem to hope would be the case.
Right. I represent a lot of different NIL collectives, and when this whole House settlement preliminary approval happened a number of months ago, the big question that was facing me and my clients in that space was, are the NIL collectives still going to be relevant? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is yes, and in very different ways. You're going to have schools like the Alabamas and the Oklahomas and the really big-time schools that are going to be able to do the rev sharing with their athletes up to that $20.5 million cap. But they're also going to have the advantage of, circumventing that cap by having their athletes paid through the third-party deals through the collective. And they've even jumped ahead of that and have started signing those contracts before the settlement was finalized. And if those payments are made before July 1st, they're not going to be subject to that fair market value review this year. So the collectors are still going to find a way to be important and be effective for their schools and the teams that they're supporting.
All right, so take me through the process here from your understanding. Say somebody submits their deal for whatever to get it approved by the College Sports Commission, and it gets denied. What happens next at that point?
Sure. So there is the possibility for denial from the College Sports Commission. In that scenario, the athlete can then go back to the party that they've contracted with to revise the deal and resubmit it, or they can appeal the decision from the CSC to a neutral arbitrator to argue that their contract is fair and valid. We don't know how that's going to look. We don't know how strict that's going to be because nothing's happened yet. The platform is going to launch tomorrow. I don't think all the schools are going to have access until the 20th. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, there's a big conference, NAFTA, going on right now down in Orlando with all the people in the college athletics world, and they're having conversations about this literally this moment. I'm getting text messages and screenshots from these presentations talking about how NIL Go is going to work. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, and then also seeing that when that first contract gets denied or goes back for revisions, what that next step is going to be. Because if we've learned anything in this industry over the last few years, whenever the NCAA or any other sort of enforcement agency or any sort of rules are put in place, other third parties are going to find a way to get around it and be creative. That's how NIL Collectors were founded in the first place.
Right.
So I know for a fact there's going to be creative solutions to make it work and to put the CSC in a difficult situation at some point.
Yeah, my assumption, Dan, I could be wrong. It feels like that'll, unless they just start approving everything, it feels like that'll happen sooner than later, right? Like the first time anybody of any significant value this happens to, like lawyer, lawsuit, and I would assume, tell me if I'm wrong, like there would be a judge somewhere that would toss an injunction on it and allow somebody to get paid and play through something like this.
Yeah, and I think there's a very valid argument to say that a private contract between two parties, shouldn't be subject to any sort of third-party review. I mean, let's face it, college sports is borderline, at the very least, professional sports at this point. Mm-hmm. And in our professional sports leagues, are third-party deals being reviewed by a neutral third-party organization? No. So, I mean, the whole idea here is very interesting. We'll see how long it lasts. There will definitely be some challenges in court, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. I hope none of my clients have to face any sort of issues, but if it does, I'll be prepared.
Yeah, you and a lot of people, I'd imagine, Dan. So we got Dan Green with us here because it's going to happen somewhere, and it's probably going to happen somewhere sooner than later. And that goes along to, all right, big picture, what's next? We saw in the House earlier today, they're introducing bills which potentially could codify some of this. Like, is that the end result here? At some point, there needs to be an actual law this fits into, or even if there is a law, would it be the same thing that somebody sued and you got judges and constitutionality and a bunch of stuff that most of us don't really understand?
Yeah, that's the wishful thinking. A lot of people in this industry are looking at the House settlement as step one to stability in the college athletics landscape, and then having federal legislation being step two to finally nail down and make everything sort of calm and have some sort of normalcy and rules and regulations and safeguards. And as we said, there's been plenty of federal laws that have been introduced regarding these issues. None of them have gone anywhere.
Right.
There are two more that have been introduced, I believe, today, and we'll see if it goes anywhere. I mean, the big thing that the NCAA is looking for when it comes to federal laws is that they want an antitrust exemption, and they want it to be deemed that the college athletes are not employees. two huge things that are very, very controversial, where there really isn't a unanimous consent one way or the other. Like, I've been very hesitant to say that a federal law would actually happen, but considering the House settlement has gone through and that the Trump administration appears to be interested in the topic, there's maybe a higher chance that the federal law pushes through and maybe happens. But again, there's just so much else going on. And also, in the world today, is college athletics the most important thing happening in this country? Even though it's important in a big part of my life, I can honestly say it's not the most important thing to your everyday person. So we'll see what happens there, but that's the end game for the NCAA.
We got Dan Green with us, and we're trying to figure this all out of where it's going to go. And you mentioned the antitrust exemptions, and for those that don't know, like that's my understanding, right? Like every major professional sports league in America, NFL, MLB, all that's what they have, right? That's why, and they have collective bargaining. That's why they're allowed to operate the way they do.
The latter part is where you're most correct. The ability to collectively bargain. So if you have the two bargaining bodies, meaning the athletic association and the group of players being able to negotiate their rules, it really helps protect any sort of antitrust issues. In college athletics, we don't have collective bargaining. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of experts out there and a lot of people in the space that think that is really the most realistic end goal here, is to have collective bargaining, to have rules discussed and agreed upon, and signing collective bargaining agreements that last a certain period of time. That's the only way to really solve this. I think that's a fair assumption, but college athletics in this country is so unique, unlike anything else in the world. So it's hard to tell if it would actually work, considering college athletics is more than football and men's basketball. It goes all the way down to tennis and track and field and everything like that. And there's going to be a lot of moving parts to finally get down to business of what the future of college athletics actually holds.
I said this yesterday, like in the NFL, as much as the salaries are different, like Patrick Mahomes and like a fourth-round rookie, or you say like Kyle McCord this year, they actually, while the salaries are way apart, they do have something in common. They are NFL football players, and there's not that many. Like in college football, right, like Arch Manning and Hobart's linebacker don't have a lot in common, right? Like how could something like that come together at the college level where there are so many and it is so different from level to level to level?
Exactly, and that's a part of the issue here. Men's basketball and football are their own animals, and there's been a call for a number of years for those, like basically, the Power 2 schools, SEC, Big Ten, and some others, to break off from the NCAA and just create their own, essentially, power conference association focus on football and basketball. But at the same time, just because you're a big football school doesn't mean you're a big basketball school, and vice versa. There's been a lot of conversation about, with this rev share and coming out of this House settlement, there's going to be schools like St. John's that are going to be at a total advantage, since they don't have to pay out their football players. They don't have a football team, and they're going to be able to dump a ridiculous amount of money into their basketball team. And there's going to be different varying situations throughout the country, because some schools are football school, hockey school, softball school, things like that. So the variety here, as you said, whatever the solution is, whatever that happens, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a lot of thoughts and a lot of discussion amongst various people within the industry.
I found it interesting. I mean, it just happened in the Women's College World Series in softball. Like Texas Tech was like, "Hey, let's be good at softball," and they gave a pitcher $1 million, and they came within a few innings of winning the national championship. That's like a really weird offset of NIL right now. That's happening in various sports around the country.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to third-party deals, too, I mean, all it takes is a billionaire to say, I want my alma mater, my local school, whatever, to be awesome at X, Y, and Z sport. It makes this really interesting. I think that's kind of it's not a stable solution, but it does happen. There's people that give money to schools you've never heard of, or sports you may not be paying attention to, where that's played a factor. I mean, I'm a big hockey guy. I attend the Frozen Four every year. Western Michigan just won the national championship, and a big part of that is they had this big donor that just created this big, beautiful hockey facility out in Kalamazoo. Same but different from NIL. So, again, college athletics is so unique, unlike anything else in the world, and coming up with any solutions to move forward with how things are working in the courts, it's going to take a lot of work.
Last thought for you, Dan. This came down a couple months ago, but I'm sure it must tie into all this. Like, Kentucky announced basically they're spinning their athletic department off as an LLC. Illegally explain what that means, and is that just the forefront of everybody doing that? Is that what you have to do now, just the way how all this money is going to work and how things are going to be flowing?
Yeah, I think Kentucky's view there is that they're a big athletics school, but as athletics is a big part of their school. But again, they're still to listen to and be a part of the entire school as a whole. And by being able to cut themselves off the athletic department, maybe from the school, it allow them some wiggle room to do what they want a little more. Every institution is different. Some have looked into that. Some think it's a great idea. Some think it's not feasible. But big schools are going to be at an advantage to take more risks and push the envelope here, while some maybe of our smaller schools, whether they're power 2, power 4 schools, whatever you want to call them, they may not be able to do that because, let's be honest, there's a difference between Syracuse University and Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It just how there's a difference between Syracuse University and Lemoyne. Everybody's going to have to see what they have because, private education, there's issues there, money rolling in, enrollment being down. It's college athletics has become a business, and some schools have to make that decision about whether they're going to accept that or not.
Well, fascinating times, Dan, and it's not getting less interesting by the day how this all goes. Appreciate the time and all the info. I'm sure we'll check in again soon.
Of course, happy to check in anytime.